So hello, everyone, and thank you very much for coming this afternoon, this evening, depending where you are. Merci d'être venu. I'm Lev Bertyshenko, curator public at CCA and host for this series called Docu-Dramas. So over the past 4 or 5 months now, we've been watching 5 different architecture firms sort of deal with the consequences of accepting my invitation. And I really want to start by thanking them for their open-mindedness and curiosity and accepting the challenge and the framing. So with us, and I'll just say them in the order of the talks because I think they're all in different orders for you, are Ilse and Heinrich Wolf of Wolf Architects in Cape Town, South Africa. We have Artyom Kitaev and Leonid Slanimsky from Cosmos, sort of somewhere in the space between Moscow, Basel, Bangkok, and New York, and Austria today. We have David Barragan of El Borde Arquitectos in Quito. We have James Shen of People's Architecture Office between Beijing and Boston, calling from Toronto, and Tuomas Tuivinen of Now Architecture in Helsinki. So thank you all. The docudrama series was like an investigation of what lies beyond and beside the visual and an attempt to openly discuss aspects of practice that maybe visuality can hide. What I didn't predict, although it's totally obvious in retrospect, it was that this challenge would also mean that each practice had to confront their own archive. Looking for these documents is sort of like looking in a new kind of mirror and maybe not always recognizing what you see. So in the end, it's also a series about making and interpreting archives.
Yeah, somehow that like found a different voice or a different way to talk about it. I've done a lot of lectures where I don't bring images. So, and I have like a kind of problem with showing kind of any materials. So somehow, and it was kind of nice that there was this category of materials that are you know, not fit for the architectural frame in a way, and then to kind of through that to really approach in a way this legal and kind of sales material of housing, and in a way how it also puts really the architect into, you know, it actually really shows what we do in a very direct and kind of honest way, and we can, with our images, we can create a kind of illusion or a kind of acceptable aesthetic around the things that we do, but very often the things that we produce, they live in that other world of documents, in that other, you know, kind of surrounded, and, you know, we're producing an aesthetic which is not the one that we had in mind, and it's something which is beyond our control as well. When you say client, there's immediately this idea that comes to mind. It's a kind of caricature in a way of a person, in a way. When you call them clients, I think it's kind of obscene. I would hate to be called a client, if, you know, as a human. You know, it's not a nice. I think also consultant is kind of like an unpleasant like role. So in a way, you know, maybe everyone, they're just people, and these are, in a way, organizations and humans that we work together with, and but then how to work together and kind of with what terms do we engage, that becomes the question. And how do you design in a way that relationship is, I think, part of the work as well.
When we teach in university with the students, in one of the studio, we exactly asked them to play not as an architect, but we work on one renovation project, and we try to another approach. So we say, okay, guys, imagine you're not architects. You're not aiming now for the beauty, but you just like own all this stuff. So each move which you make, like to remove partition or to introduce, I don't know, huge cantilever, you have to pay by yourself. So of course, like you start to be much more practical. And also you think, okay, instead of like just tearing down all like half of the building and then and then build something new, then you said, okay, probably I can keep it on the side, probably I can turn it differently, probably I can use it. So it's different mindset, which I think it's very important to us, that we're not just like abstract figures who like, you know, sketching on the like concepts on the paper and then post them in media and so on, that we are really participants on the, not of the construction process, but probably of process of the use, like of adaptation, of development of the place, with all the risks and responsibilities as actually clients, tenants, and everyone who's involved. Because in a way, architect from like all this circle from client, user, and the contractor, we're the less involved afterwards. We usually don't take any responsibilities, except probably shame in media. And we usually don't risk so much money. We don't risk to live in a bad space. So it's interesting that even though we feel us like as a kind of heads of this process, but actually we are almost excluded from this.
It can be also kind of truly revealing, I think, to see. And I think this is maybe the difficulty, that we get to choose our documents ourselves. And in a way, so you supposedly you're showing something which is like not to be shown, but you can still be very careful with it. And it's not, there's nothing of an expose. There's nothing that's truly compromising. Actually, it's still very safe. It's still it's just in a way teasing the edge of convention in a sense, which is also, it makes sense that's how we begin. But maybe in a way this is like this is just the start of a trajectory, and maybe in the future there will be this escalating. Everybody will be kind of, oh you're showing that, let me show you something, and then you kind of maybe there's this kind of power inflation, race to the bottom of like who can tell the most most shameful thing, or showing the document that most puts their practice into a kind of light of compromise.
I really appreciate that it seems to be a return to storytelling, and it's a kind of a disruption of the kind of narrative of the sales pitch that has kind of dominated the architectural lecture for a very long time. Sort of like, look at my buildings, these are the achievements of the buildings, this is it's about achievement a lot of the time, and about technical achievement or an intervention in a space and so on. And I quite appreciate that there seems to be a kind of a sense that there's interest not in compelling stories, and stories that kind of empower and bring together people and show vulnerability, because we're all very vulnerable, and we all sort of like, pretend like we're not, because that's part of the performance of being an architect or a kind of a principal agent in a project. You have to perform power, in some cases, you have to perform power that you sometimes don't even have. So it's a kind of a nice way to like share vulnerability and give a sense to develop a public culture around that demystifies what we do.
So when we started going through the archive, the realization about how many non-disclosure agreements you signed, where I can tell you the stories we told you were the boring ones. The ones that would make your hair stand on end is the ones that we have non-disclosure agreements about, where there's a reason why people ask you to sign those things, because there are things that happen that should actually be public knowledge, where you are barred from communicating what conditions you are working under or what you have done. And those would be very interesting. And this, it's basically a restriction on freedom of speech that we sort of voluntarily have to enter into, and sometimes with a state. Now, that's a constitutional issue. if the state asks you to give up your freedom of speech in order to work with him. But that is common today with working with the state, with us. And that is an issue. But the other issue that comes out of this kind of work is this thing of doing things out of a sense of benevolence, but doing it in a sort of a self-appointed authoritarian manner, is that you decide what is benevolent. Sometimes it is discussed, but sometimes that is a private judgment that is made. And it's a very strange thing of our profession, where there's this thing of the public good that is decided in private by an individual behind a computer screen late at night. And
I think this example of in a way, the public good that, in a way, is, kind of really embedded deep in a lot of the decisions that architects have to do. We have to always be representing the people who are not around the table. And, I think it's there's nothing is neutral. There is no neutrality there, in a way. And this public good also, you can say it's subjective, but it's also not. I mean, it's extremely political always. And the decision that you make, that you prioritize one thing over the other, that's power. And that can be done in very different ways. It can be done in the way you organize the floor plan, or it can be in the way that you organize your practice, your office, or how you work with people. And I think also in this group, there's like for everyone, it's obvious how they are doing their thing. But when you look at these practices together and their contexts, it's amazing, that we are in the same profession in a way. Also, I mean, we have a common language, but still, there are we are inhabiting very, very different environments and part of very different types of systems.
I had a question. Speaking about common language, we have here, probably thanks to Lev, such a variety of cultures, time zones, countries, and so on. I wanted to ask, did anyone feel that, for instance, for their, let's say, culture or context, it was inappropriate, this whole idea of revealing the background? Because, for instance, I kind of can say that I witnessed together two cultures and two backgrounds, the Russian and the Swiss one. And for sure, I can say that in Russia, there is the concept of that, and I think it also has to do with the religion, with the history, and we can also go to which European religions have the same points, but I don't want to make kind of exact notes. But I know that in Russia, for instance, the how you are perceived is very important, and to hide the way how it's done is also very important. So there is even, this metaphor of Potemkin village and so on. Whereas, for instance, for Swiss, it's obvious that maybe it's the Protestant culture, but these probably philosophers should say that the revealing of how it is made, how to say, for instance, the bare concrete in architecture, it's a Swiss topic, and the stucco is probably a Russian topic, because you need to hide how it's done. So it's interesting for me to ask you all, like with the range from Quito to Cape Town to Beijing to Helsinki, did you guys, and you also, for instance, we have in Cape Town, if I can understand, people of very different cultures, both in the same town. Did you feel this kind of inner repulsion or like controversy? Oh, wow, Lev is asking us, or CCA is asking us to reveal something. How will we do? Like it's embarrassing, or the opposite. Oh, that's completely normal. Like that's how we do. Everything is clear. Everything is, let's say, on the vitrine. Like, was there this? Anyone thought about this, and anyone reflected it through their own local context, through their own local culture?
We don't have these feelings about if it's appropriate or not to present this kind of files. Our main concerns were more about the legal issues. We are more concerned about the legal issues, about to present some information. For example, our introduction is not with our picture of the office of the four partners. It's with our diplomas is with our architect diploma. So we are thinking about if it's if we have any kind of problem presenting us like this, with these kind of documents. We never have these issues about appropriate or not. Maybe, I don't know if it's our culture. I don't know, maybe it's our attitude. No, we don't have shame to present this kind of information. For us, what was in our mind is.
David, you get frozen, I guess.
It froze at the
We
best.
will get the most interesting. He's
We all
not
do.
able to reveal it.
It's a beautiful moment. It's a
Stop.
beautiful moment.
Free him.
Let's remember it.
But it's actually true that because when we then think about revealing, that somehow it looks like when you're revealing the backstage of your practice,
David is back.
no one would benefit from this, neither architect nor client. But at the same time, it's so important to reveal the process to understand how it's actually run, not to repeat the same mistakes. Probably, David, we lost you a certain moment. Probably you want
David,
to continue.
please continue. Sorry.
We lost you at this moment.
Yes, sorry.
You look very
So
beautiful and passionate.
Maybe if I thought in our Ecuadorian Catholic tradition or culture, maybe it's not good to show all of this information, of course. But we don't use this kind of filters. Yeah. Our goal was to present these projects in that way. So we need to try the best way to address the problem, not more. All of this information is not important for us. Yeah, we never thought about this. It is appropriate or inappropriate. I wanna do the question to my partners.
But can I just say is that there were things that I would love to tell you about, but I think I might be ashamed to have to admit how much manipulation has gone into achieving something. Because in some of the biggest instances, I would say the amount of manipulation are extraordinary, and they are years-long projects of manipulation. It's like a chess game where you're moving pieces around and you're trying to trip up the castle, and you're pretending that you're antagonizing the bishop. You're at the bishop, you're around the bishop, but you're trying to trip up the castle, and you know you're trying to trip up the castle. And when the castle comes, you strike like that, and people think it was an accident or like a happy opportunity, and you were sitting for years and years and years plotting to trip up the castle. You know, you can see I'm using metaphors because I cannot give real examples. But in my case, I think I'm a very strategic kind of a person. But it is a little bit embarrassing to confess to the extent of that game, because that game is a long and a hard and a deep one. Simply because in our culture, I would say that the work of architects are generally not taken very seriously, and our opinions are not taken very seriously. So there's something about something that you really believe in. In order to make it happen, you want to put it in a position where people choose what you would like them to choose. And that's why I'm conflicted between highly democratic practices and highly undemocratic practices, because we engage in lots of public discussion in order to establish need, and we very seriously listen to it. But on the other hand, I've got my heavy foot on the scale and I'm tipping it without people noticing that we're doing it. And it's part of the strategy of making something come out in an extraordinary way, because people don't always choose for the beautiful option. People don't always choose for something that's provocative or has a lot of character. They choose for the functional or the thing aligned with their previous expectations, not necessarily for the innovative. So in order to move to the innovative, you've got to manipulate the situation substantially. And in that sense, I feel a little bit awkward about really admitting what we do.
But also a lot of the time, we spend a lot of time talking to people, you know, just like conversations that you think might lead somewhere, might not lead anywhere, might lead to, you know, the core of the project sometimes, you know. So that's why we invited Premish on, because I mean, the project is a result of years of talking, just talking, you know, and in that process of talking, you begin to listen to the kinds of things that actually the underlying desire, because people will have a public desire of what they need or what they think they need, but then there's a kind of an underlying subconscious desire of what is, possibly more interesting. And, so to get to that point and to get to the point of strategizing to that point requires lots of listening. So we used to talking a lot, and used to talking with, aimlessly as well, because that is part of the context that we're working in, so it is, yeah. I mean, so we didn't have a problem sharing the things that we have, but at the same time, we do come from a very Anglo society. The Anglo societies are extremely polite. They don't say what they mean. They don't say what's actually meant to be saying. I mean, we also come from a very Dutch society, a Protestant. So there's a colonial setup that it's kind of brought in these kind of sentiments, and it's quite patriarchal. It's Catholic and it's Protestant, and it's kind of very sort of cultural in a sense. But then there's a kind of underlying desire of the context of the African context, and the kind of a sense of conversation and storytelling and thinking through that multiplicity of ways of making things, that we actually working with. It's sort of like this kind of a colonial sensibility with a kind of indigenous deep history, that we kind of constantly engaging with, so it's very complex. And that's why it takes long to get to that point, and it takes long to sort of think through what would be the subconscious desires of things. And then to try and make a building out of that is, yeah, I don't know, is hectic. So that's why we try and do things in groups and collaboratively, because it needs endurance.
Yeah, listening to everyone, it really strikes me, the context in which everyone is working in is also very clear in the way that you're talking about the documents and the projects. And I think with this, for this talk and looking at our archive or documents, I also realized how unique our context might be, because I mean, my first reaction was we don't really have documents. The pace and the speed that things move and change. I mean, it's not. It's just a certain. There's a certain amount of unpredictability that's in every single project that I don't know. I feel like might be more extreme in the context of China. I'm not sure, but certainly the respect that you have for documents, like for example, the legal aspects of things, we've never had to sign a non-disclosure agreement, or seldom. So there's also not much of we're not afraid to really show anything, although there's plenty of things that we know we have to be very careful about. I guess in my talk, I showed some documents, documents showing land ownership in different during different periods, which is sensitive if you know details. The people that we work with, a lot of times the situation is informal. I mean, even with larger, somewhat proper projects, there's a certain amount of informality to it. So the documents, when we do have proper documents, they're not documents that we would go and discuss with a lawyer with. I mean, we also don't really talk to lawyers so much, because there's at a certain point, we also recognize that a contract doesn't really protect us from a lot of things. Especially in our context, I mean, we're sort of powerless to then kind of take this and say, hey, you said you were going to pay me by this time, and you haven't. So unfortunately, there's this kind of situation. Yeah. So actually, there's a space that's in between the documentation and the actual reality. But at the same time, that space is a space that we really have spent a lot of time in. This kind of in between space where you do also have a lot of opportunity and a lot of projects. I kind of joked when I talked about our work is that a lot of them are actually not the projects are not technically legal. And the motivation for doing this kind of work is to get closer to people that actually use our buildings, people that we think we are interested in serving. And so, yeah, I think in terms of documentation, I ended up looking more at kind of our equivalent of WhatsApp messages, and that's kind of how you kind of promise things or handwritten notes to residents around us that we're not really legal documents, but really tied us to a kind of responsibility. So in the end, we really take on a lot of risk. I think documents are often there to protect, right? And it is strategic because you're kind of considering all these possibilities in the future. For us, a lot of our practice is really just tactical.
I think it's very interesting, James, how you said that someone is not afraid to show like the documents to reveal something. And that's interesting because I think it's not even about fear of do something illegal. It's more there is certain pattern how we used to represent offices, but also a certain pattern of communication between client and the architect. But as well, even like broadly, it's a general pattern of the role architect in like an entire industry, or let's say if you want social role. And in these terms, I think when we reveal in these documents, when we kind of open up the entire process and look at this kind of openly, it's a very important point of self-reflection, and also like actually what is our role, because if it's like really so that there are some clients with the money which look for the guys with the skills who is like building up the buildings, like, and we can serve in this very economy driven development of the countries, and the economy has like pretty much clear goals which often contradicting to like social goals and to general, like I would say, even economical goals, but in a longer perspective. So that's very important to have, I think, such a like open discussions when revealing.
You made a cake, Thomas.
You what?
You made a cake, Thomas?
I made a cake.
Wow.
I'm going to measure all my events now and how long it takes to make a pie.
I think you had like a certain parallel discussion. So just like to conclude what I want to say, I think it's so important to reveal this, to have a chance to self-reflect and openly discuss what is the general role of architecture and the direction which we go in. Because I think many things should be discussed, rethought, and rearranged, redefined. And it's very good that you, Lev, give us like such a chance to, because while preparing this lecture, many things got a bit more crystal to us. So, and that's important, at least now we know things better. So yeah, I think it was in these terms very useful.
I think what the documents really show is they're like they manifest relationships, I think, in all cases, and I think this is really, the relationship isn't in the document, but in a way the document, I think every case really like reveals the nature of a relationship and also somehow the limits of exactly this power, or in a way the limits of the role of the architect in a way as well. And I think what's nice also to see other practices in a way kind of different examples is really that there actually is no standard for this. It can be anything, or that in a way we while we design our projects, we also design our relationships. So we design ourselves, our own roles as architects. We design our, in a way, also our clients' roles together in a way through the projects. Different projects end up with kind of very different dynamics and so on, but they're not necessarily preset. They're not fixed in stone, and this is also something that I think really, if you look at the history of architecture, this has also been one of the ways that architects have always sought to be able to, in a way, do better work or to have, in a way, more relevance, more power, maybe in some sense. I mean,
so there's a kind of a concern around how do we share aspects of the profession that is not well known, that is confidential, but would actually move certain parts of the profession in a new direction. So I think it's very important, but I also think that one needs to make that space quite, it's a trust relationship that one needs to build up. So I'm sharing these secrets with you, hoping that it has a benefit. It has a benefit for you, but it might not be a benefit for somebody else. Or that it needs to. There needs to be kind of like a trust relationship that's set up. And I don't know if the lecture format is that, because it's sort of very open-ended, and it's very like you don't know where this information is going. You don't have control in a way. There's no relationship being set up. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, but I do know that, we're being recorded, and that doesn't feel good for a trust relationship to be established. So how do we do that is it needs to, I think maybe the pedagogical space could be that space. You work with people quite intimately through projects. The studio is definitely that space. We have trust relationship with the people that we work with. So yeah, I don't know the answer, but I think the public lecture has evolved to a point where there's literally no trust. You talk and you share your achievements, and I think I'm seeing now a point where we are trusting each other again, but there's still ambivalence. So I don't know.
But take another example is, what do you do to get paid?
Yeah.
I mean, and we all know is that, when the chips are down and your business is in real trouble, and you have to get money, what do you really do to get paid if the future of your business depends on it? If you're not independently wealthy, if you're just really middle class and on the brink of bankruptcy because you wagered all your money on exploring something. Those things are not things that's easy to talk about in public. But one of the forms of transmitting that is the form of apprenticeship, where somebody works with you and you can tell them, what I'm going to do to get paid. But to say it in either a university lecture format or in a public lecture where you record it, it's very difficult. But it's really fundamental, because if you don't get paid, you can't continue unless you're independently wealthy.
How do you survive? How do you make sure that that you can align your own agendas, and then have some kind of rapport with the market in a way that you can either get away with something or build a kind of sustainable platform or environment for working, and that you can organize a kind of your life in a way that makes sense. I think that's really a big, because I think there was also I don't remember anymore who exactly said, but in a way this that like in a way like that you project success or that there are kind of, and then I think it's a kind of very, it's also I think relative or I think we can also be critical of what is success. I think if success is that you work like really like hell forever, and you do, like, for example, you kind of kill yourself for every project with your ambition and deliver in a way 500% to clients who are like just want the building, and you just really want make everything so intense and so on, is that what does that lead to? It leads to an ulcer or something, and so what's the what kind of metrics do we have for this? And I think can you how do you make sense of it? And also I think one of the things is, how do you keep yourself engaged or interested, or if you get really good at doing a certain thing, is that the thing you want to do forever? If you really crack like this great I don't know, housing floor plan, and then that's what you kind of, it's easy to just keep with the same network and just kind of keep producing that and so on. But maybe also you want to do something else, or you through that you realize also that maybe this isn't what you want to do, or there's something wrong with the, you know, with the whole arrangement or the whole setup, and then you end up kind of questioning that. And I think it's really and I agree with this in a way, the public lecture or the written word or the, you know, the digital material that stays around forever, and in a way takes our place. You know, this talk will outlast us probably, and you know, will be gone, but what we said will remain.
You know, when I was at architecture school, it always sounded very cool to think radical thoughts. And our experience is that it gets dangerous, that people start hating you, that people fire you, and that you receive death threats. And that it becomes a very dangerous space, that you lose commissions. You say something that is an honestly felt conviction, and people end your contract. And it's the end of the relationship and so on. And I don't know if maybe it's the space that we are working in, but I mean, it's maybe confronting legacies of coloniality and apartheid and those sorts of things. But you start saying what you think really needs to be said, and suddenly your commission is over. You know, people don't want to hear that. You say, do you realize what you did to slaves here 200 years ago? And it's like, oops, you're not the right person for us. You know, you're not sensitive to our luxury lifestyle anymore. I mean, I would love to know how many of you have had death threats on building sites, you know, because I've had more than one. So it's, you know, it's a very, you know, there are strange situations under which we work that the beautiful images in the end really are quite mute to, you know. But thank you for creating this forum. I think it is worth thinking about these things.
I want to add something about the client that I like a lot, because the architecture debate is always very, very narrow, from architects to architects. So when you add this layer of the client, it's really good for the narrative of the project, because you can see the project from the other side, not only we as an architect, also the students, also everyone, and we can open the discussion of architecture. So that will be really nice to understand, maybe, I don't know, one project from the perspective of the engineers, from the perspective of the tenor, from the perspective of the client, the user, the architects, and everyone involved, because each one is living this project from different points of view. So it's very fruitful to understand how important is each one in the whole process, because architecture is not only the final great picture, it's about the whole process that demands to achieve this final build project. So all of this perspective add so many layers with so many difficulties that create a big narrative, beyond the architecture as well. And for us, I was thinking also about what Thomas said about the client and the difficult for him. And I like a lot, because we are in the opposite place. We have a lot of the problems with our archives because we are a big mess. And we have a lot of problems with dealing with all of the information that we produce, not only the digital one. But with the clients, we have the completely opposite relationship. Our projects are very, not small in scale, but our projects are rely on a close relationship with the client. If we don't have this relationship with the client, we don't have any kind of project. So it's completely the opposite. So we don't have problems with the client. We have, I don't know, five easy options to connect for this Docu-Drama. And I like a lot to see how each one has different kind of challenges to address the same problem specifically with your curatorial direction.
generally we like to produce like image, like probably not only us, but many offices business-wise, we like to produce like as a successful enterprise where everything goes kind of smooth. We have a genius idea, and then the client get it, and then everyone is happy there. But when, for example, you did something and completely failed, and you could fail like in any step, a conceptual step when no one understood it, and then the whole like way you try to keep it, and actually lost a lot of weekends, nerves and hairs to make it happen, then at the end it just didn't happen. Like in one of our projects, for example, there was a project in the park with many trees, and to save these trees, and it was like under very big preservation code, we're not allowed to touch them. And then we did really big effort and kind of made some really not nice cutouts from the project and from the design, which didn't make it so nice, but with the tree it was okay. And then when the structure was already complete, we came in the morning to the construction site, and the tree was so, I'm like, what? I really didn't understand what was going on. And then apparently the park just several years ago already put this tree in one archive that is kind of sick tree, so it should be removed. But because different departments of the park didn't coordinate work very well, one department which was like signing the document said it's absolutely important to preserve it. And we did so much work to preserve it. And then in the end, there's a stupid like hole in the middle of the building. No one understands what for. So it's kind of, I think it's also important to share these moments that other architects understand they're not alone.
There's one thing I wanted to point out is also just the diversity that we have here. That we have practices from all parts of the world, and that it's not exactly representative of I think the way that the world of architecture is represented to the public, just because the conversation is so dominated by the West, North America and Europe. And I think in talking about, I think the way that we're talking about documentation is really about providing perspectives, right? And so I just thought that this was something that I really enjoyed about this series and listening to all of you, because I feel like there's lots of ways that we can connect. That I think in many ways the context of in the context of the US or Europe and whatnot it may not embody that aspect of practice, right? Yeah, so I think I don't feel like any practice that is here is a standard practice, right? So many extremely interesting alternative. I mean, I feel very close to all of you in the way that you work, and I'm very inspired and so happy that you exist.
Oh, thank you, James. Yeah, no, thank you all so much. I mean, I also feel like this has been a surprisingly kind of warm Zoom room, and I really appreciated your openness and kind of generosity over the past few months, and also, of course, today. So I hope not too far in the future we will meet on the street corner somewhere or at a bar, and be able to continue this with a few more bottles.
I want some pie.
Yeah, well, of course, this is Thomas's responsibility. Sorry, you now have to carry pie with you.
You have to post pie.
Is it done? Is it baked?
Yeah.
What is that? What kind of pie is
Berry?
It's got berries, lingonberry, and some yogurt, and what's it called? Cranberries.
So
Wow.
cool. So we also have to have a format that is like a lecture with the cooking show at the same time. So you
Nice.
A recipe for each.
yeah, no.
Well done.
Let's at least add each other on Facebook, maybe. Maybe this will break the ice a little bit.